Welcome to the Tea with Tamara Podcast. I'm Tamara Arnold, and it wasn't that long ago that I was a broke single mom drinking way too much, completely detached from everything. Now I've written multiple books, downloaded I Could Read Chakras, and I'm a channel for the universe. I'm a real person with real stories, and I can't wait to share them with you. So grab a warm bevy and let's have some enlightened conversation to live our best life. Happy Magical Monday, you guys. I am so excited to share with you something that I have began using in my life and business and in my relationship with my husband and just all areas of my life. And if you have been listening to the podcast for a little bit and you're starting to get to know me, I don't really do well under serious conditions. I really love fun and play and feeling activated energetically and connected and grounded to my inner self in order to make the most difference in the world. And so over the last few years, as I've sank deeper and deeper into my spiritual practices and, starting to see the world as something that we co-create with spirit and energy and the vibrations all around us, one of the things that I get often asked the most with my clients and that I questioned the most until recently was, but what do I do to break the habit? What do I do to shift my mindset? What do I do to stop the same self-sabotaging behavior over and over and over again? Because let's face it, once we're locked in a loop, sometimes it feels like we just can't get off the train. It's just like chewing around in circles and patterns and behaviors over and over and over again. And the crazy part is that we can see it from the outside, right? Like we can be aware of it and be like, oh my God, I just did that thing again. Why am I doing this again? And you have the awareness about it, but not the action step to actually shift or change it. Now, I go back often to my relationship with my son and when him and I finally altered the same cyclic loop of behaviors that we had was that I was willing to do the worst thing any mother emotionally feels is the worst thing ever. I was willing to walk away, to completely cut all cords with my son and say, we're done. And I look back at that moment as being a really pivotal shift and change in my life because up until that time, I would say I would do it. I would put all the practices and, the words out there and the actions out there. But when it came right down to the moment, I would always try and save him. And I would never actually break the cord. I would never cut the cord. And so, the day that I did, the day that I legitimately said, we're done, it was as if I had done the polar opposite of everything else I had done up until that moment in time. All right? Because what I've realized even more so since then is that in order to shift or change something that we are currently caught up in, we need to be willing to really bring ourselves back to a state of grace and to wholeness and oneness. And we do this by legitimately doing the opposite of what our ego or our front brain or our, as Michael J. Singer, our noisy roommate is telling us to do. And I'm going to give you an example of this that's come about recently. Now, last April, I retired my husband because he was not happy in his job, right? And nothing to do with his job, but just it was grinding. It was like he didn't really enjoy what he was doing anymore. And he just felt like he needed a break. He didn't want to be in that job for a second longer. So it was affecting when he came home from work. So when my business started to take off to the point that I felt that I could sustain us, I said, why don't you leave your job? I know it'll take a few months to get yourself into a space where, you've refound yourself and you have an idea of what you want to do next and connect and all that kind of stuff. And I was willing to wait those few months and allow that transition to occur because anytime we make the blind leap into a new place in our lives, there is a little bit of discomfort and, self-awareness and self-development that goes on. But what was happening is that it started to almost like rabbit hole deeper and deeper. And over the last year and a half, his depression has gone up, right? His emotional state has gotten worse. And there didn't seem anything that I could do to make a difference. And guys, I'm just putting this out here for anyone who is listening who is a life coach. And anyway, it is a fine line in your relationships when you want to make things better and you see the world as solvable problems, and you're still a wife who can't do that with her partner. And so, you're trying all of the soft, tiptoeing around all of the different ways that I could help support him in whatever way possible. But it wasn't actually helping us. It wasn't actually solving our relationship issue. And it was definitely not making his sadness go away any more than it was. And so, as I've been reading A Course in Miracles deeper and deeper and getting more into my spiritual practicing, last week there was a really big aha moment because I realized that having grown up in a house with a mom who had depression and then having a son who had depression, that I actually don't know how to live with somebody who isn't depressed. And I'm throwing this into the conversation about how we can change or shift things by doing the opposite, because the first thing I did, of course, was go down and let my husband know that there is an awareness here. The awareness is that I don't know how to live with somebody that is healthy and feels really good. And so there is a piece that I truly believe is me manifesting his sadness because he can't quite understand why it's this deep, right? And even when I brought it up to him, I felt this release happen on him. And we have had so much fun, and his spirit and his mood has shifted dramatically since then. And then just last night, I had another aha moment that had to do with our intimacy and, previous past relationships where it wasn't there, and the realization that I was living into that expectation that you can't be married and have a really exceptional sex life at the same time. And so this morning, we've had these aha moments. Everything is going really great. And we wake up this morning and it's like, boom, I could almost watch from the sidelines the same negative behavior start to play out again. And it usually revolves around the business. And, the tone of voice that happens when my husband gets into the lower emotional states regarding, what it is that he's doing in the business. And I'm always like, okay, why do you sound so sad about the business? And then when he starts to seem sad, I go into my own head that, now I don't even feel like I want to be intimate with him because he's sad, and or intimacy the only thing that's going to make him feel better. I mean, it's a shit show in terms of what's happening. But today I saw it for what it really was. And I saw it that it was a behavior or a pattern that we have been creating for not just our relationship, but potentially our entire lives. And so, as I always do, I want to play the opposite game, because it's got to be fun and it's got to be interesting and it's got to be, something that I want to do. And in truth, guys, if we want to break any habit, pattern, or belief that we have, created that has been going and going and going in our lives for however long, we have to be willing to do the opposite in order to completely shift it. And so this is my opposites game for the situation that I just brought up to you. And that is anytime my husband talks about the business, he is to sing it or be very excited when he is telling me about it, because that is the opposite of how he has been sounding, which so far today has brought me great joy. I just stand and smile when he's talking, right? It keeps the mood light. He's laughing, I'm laughing, and it's a complete mood elevation. The other thing had to do with intimacy. So anytime that I got in my head that now I just don't want to be intimate, you can clearly see where I'm going, where the polar opposite of that is that as soon as I started to have those thoughts, that I would be like, why Because truth, why would I deny myself that pleasure, right? And so I would immediately say, okay, honey, let's go make sweet love, really is what it is. And so even in the last 24 hours, the significant difference in the realization of the pattern and seeing it, observing it without attaching to it, and then doing the opposite of what we had already done is significantly shifting the energy of the house, our energy, and the energy of our relationship. When it comes to business stuff, right? So I'm going to use an example of myself here is that because I grew up around mental illness, motivation was not our jam, right? Like it was sitting and watching TV and, watching Y&R and Bold and Beautiful at night. And we didn't do a lot of things. We were not highly active. So I grew up in a culture that was the polar opposite of corporate do. Mine was more like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit here. And so getting to a space within my business where I wanted to take inspired action required me to do the opposite of what I wanted to do. So if it was like, oh, I wish I could just sit here and read my book, because if I could, I would read self-development books and young adult fantasy books all day long. It would be, okay, I really want to do this, but I know I should do something for my business. I would choose to do something for my business because it was the opposite of what I had done my entire life. The difference that I did in doing the opposite is, again, I try very hard to make things fun for me and a game and something that allows me to stay in the moment and stay present and continuously take that action. And so generally speaking, what I do, and I still do this, is if I'm reading a really good book, it will be, okay, you're going to do whatever it is in your business that you need to do. And then you get to read a chapter of your book and then you're going to do, you know what I mean? And so I was doing the opposite by taking the inspired action, but was still giving myself the opportunity to come back into my book and read it if need be, if it was really that intense and that much that I wanted to read. Because I'll read on the toilet. I will read while I'm cooking. I will read. I want to make this a Dr. Seuss quote, but I will read all the time if I can. And so my question for you is to kind of be getting to this awareness of, and we know ourselves, you guys. We know ourselves better than anybody else. And when you can get to a significant state where you can become the observer without attachment in what's going on, you can start to see the patterns that you have in place. And by acknowledging the patterns that you have in place, you can start to realize what your go-to method of coping or dealing naturally is. And when you start to see that, then you can be thinking in your head, okay, this is what I normally do, but what if I did the complete polar opposite to this? So most of my life, anytime there was any kind of emotional state of happiness, of sadness, of celebration, of, grief, whatever it was, my go-to would be drinking, right? So since I've been sober since March, my polar opposite would be not to drink, right? My polar opposite coping mechanism now has become, exercise or meditation or journaling, which are in truth the polar opposite of drinking. So I just want you to get to the awareness. I want there to be a space in which potentially when you ask yourself the question, what do I do when I am self-sabotaging? What do I do when, I see myself doing the same thing over and over again and I'm fully aware that I'm doing it, and yet you get caught into the same net as you normally do? My challenge or my thought for you today is, what if you did the opposite of what you normally do? What if you made the decision to break that habit or break that cycle or break that pattern that has been, following you or affecting you for as long as it possibly has? Because in truth, wouldn't it feel pretty amazing to no longer be stuck in the same dreary, overwhelming, sad, unhappy? I'm just talking about my husband and I, because that's the place that we had basically gotten to by allowing the same patterns that had been in our relationships and in our lives previously to affect us. So, yeah, I would love to know how this goes, guys. I would love to know what your opposite game is. I would love to know if you participated in this, if it made a difference, if you noticed an elevation in your energy or your mood or your emotions, because that really is how we gauge how we're, connected to our spiritual selves, our inner selves, is by the emotional scale. So yeah, tag me, please tag me. Please, please. I just love you guys. So tagging is like my favorite. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook under Tamara Arnold Author. And just let me know. Let me know what your opposite was and how it felt. Because this is a journey we're all on together, because we are just one happy vibration out on this planet Earth in this human body that we live in. It's so fun, isn't it? And again, you know that. And if there's anything that I can ever do for you, please just drop by the website, tamaraarnold.ca. You can email me through there. And I love hearing from you guys. And I look forward to growing and expanding and really connecting to our divine souls and our missions and our stardust, so we can live into every single day at the highest vibration that we possibly can. Have the most magical Monday. I love you, Care Bear Stare, from my heart to yours.